In my family, love was never loud. It was measured, calculated, and quietly assigned to whoever looked most impressive on paper. For as long as I could remember, that person had never been me. My father had a habit of repeating the same sentence at every gathering. Like a story, he never grew tired of telling. Your brother's wife develops $200 million properties, he would announce proudly, lifting his glass as if he had built them himself. That's what real achievement looks like. Everyone nodded. Everyone smiled, and I learned to keep my eyes on my plate. No one asked what I did. No one wondered how I paid rent, or why I was always tired, or why my hands sometimes trembled as if they were holding something invisible. When I tried to explain, the conversation drifted away from me like smoke. I'm a conductor. I once said softly. My father barely looked up. Music is nice, he replied, but it's not a career. That was the moment I understood. My life would always sound like background noise to them. My brother's wife, Rania, mastered the art of polite dismissal. She smiled when people mistook me for the artistic one, as if creativity were a harmless flaw. She spoke about luxury apartments and skyline views while I spoke about tempo and balance, and somehow her words always sounded heavier. She's happy, though, Rania once said kindly, resting a manicured hand on my arm. That's what matters. But happiness in my family only counted if it came with numbers attached. I spent my nights in rehearsal rooms that smelled of old wood and sweat, conducting musicians who believed in me even when my own blood didn't. I survived on cheap meals and borrowed time, telling myself that devotion would one day speak for me. Then one evening an envelope arrived, thick paper, elegant font. My father opened it at the dinner table. Inside were 2 tickets to the National Symphony Gala. Rania picked them up first. "Oh, I love the symphony," she said casually. My father smiled at her. "You should go. You deserve things like this." The tickets passed from hand to hand. No one noticed my name printed beneath the title, and I stayed silent because sometimes betrayal doesn't shout. Sometimes it simply forgets you exist. The concert hall was brighter than anything I had ever known. Light spilled from chandeliers like molten gold, reflecting off polished floors and velvet seats that whispered money, history, and belonging. I arrived early, slipping through the side entrance with my score tucked under my arm, heart steady but heavy. Tonight was not about proving anything. It was about honoring the music that had carried me when no one else had. From behind the curtain, I saw them take their seats. My father walked proudly beside Rania, his posture straighter than usual, as if her success lent him height. She wore a gown that shimmered under the lights, accepting compliments like they were owed to her. My brother followed quietly, his eyes scanning the hall with polite boredom. "They say this orchestra is world class," Rania murmured, glancing at her program. "I hope it's worth the time." My father chuckled. "Culture is important," he said, "even if it doesn't make money." The lights dimmed. The orchestra filed onto the stage, each musician settling into place with practiced calm. The audience hushed. Then the announcer's voice echoed through the hall, formal and clear, introducing the evening's program. "And now," he said, "please welcome tonight's guest conductor." I stepped forward. For a heartbeat, the room froze. I saw my father lean forward, confusion flickering across his face. Rania's smile faltered, her fingers tightening around the edge of her seat. Recognition arrived slowly, painfully, like truth often does when it has been ignored for too long. I raised my baton. The first note cut through the air, sharp and alive. The orchestra followed, responding to every movement, every breath I took. Years of discipline poured into sound, loneliness translated into precision, doubt transformed into control. As the music swelled, I stopped seeing faces. I felt only the pull between silence and sound, the trust of musicians who listened to me without question. This was the language I spoke fluently. This was the place where I was never overlooked. When the final movement ended, the hall erupted. Applause rose in waves, people standing, clapping until their hands burned. Flowers appeared. Cameras flashed. I lowered my baton and bowed. My father didn't stand. He remained seated, eyes fixed on me, as if trying to understand how someone he had dismissed had become someone the world applauded. Backstage, praise surrounded me, but the loudest thing I heard was the quiet space where my family should have been. And for the first time, that silence didn't hurt. It proved something. The applause faded, but its echo followed me into the days that came after. My name appeared in places my family had never bothered to look: programs, reviews, invitations printed on heavy paper. Strangers recognized me before relatives ever had. It was disorienting and strangely calm at the same time. I didn't reach out to my family. I didn't need to. The truth had its own way of traveling. 3 days after the concert, my assistant forwarded me an email marked urgent. It was from the same Cultural Development Foundation that funded several of Rainia's luxury projects. They requested a private meeting, citing artistic alignment and future vision. When I entered the boardroom, I immediately understood why I was there. Framed photographs of completed properties lined the walls, sleek, impressive, and soulless. The men and women seated around the table didn't ask about my family. They asked about my discipline, my leadership, and the way I held an orchestra together without force. We attended the gala. The chairwoman said gently, "We believe authenticity is our next investment." Then the conversation shifted. They spoke carefully but clearly. Rainia's name surfaced not as praise, but as a question. Her role had always been presentation, not creation. The vision, the execution, the credibility, it came from others, people who had been tired of staying invisible. Her contracts were under review. Mine were offered. I signed nothing that day. I simply listened. Power, I had learned, revealed itself quietly. That evening my father called. His voice sounded unfamiliar, stripped of certainty. "Why didn't you tell us you were doing so well?" he asked. I closed my eyes. "I told you what I did." I replied softly. "You decided it didn't matter." There was a pause, then a sigh heavy with regret. "I didn't know." He said. I almost laughed. Almost. Within weeks, news spread through circles my family respected more than blood. Rainia stopped attending events. My brother stopped calling, and I kept working rehearsals, compositions, collaborations that filled my days with purpose instead of longing. I wasn't celebrating their fall. I was witnessing a balance being restored. For the first time, the weight of being underestimated lifted, not because they apologized, but because I no longer needed them to. And that was when I realized revenge doesn't always arrive as destruction. Sometimes it arrives as clarity. Months passed, and the world I had quietly built outside my family's attention began to feel tangible. Invitations arrived in embossed envelopes, congratulatory letters filled my mailbox, and collaborations with prestigious orchestras took shape like constellations forming across the night sky. Every opportunity reminded me that recognition, unlike favoritism, could not be bought or assigned. It had to be earned. Another gala arrived, grander than the first, with a hall even more radiant. This time, my parents received a formal invitation. My father hesitated before accepting. My brother came too, quiet and wary, eyes darting between the stage and me, as though searching for the person he had ignored for years. Rainia was absent. That absence spoke more than any confrontation ever could. The orchestra gathered, musicians lining up like soldiers ready to follow a commander whose authority came not from birthright or marriage, but from skill, patience, and devotion. I stepped onto the podium, my hands steady, my heart calm. The hall waited. I lifted my baton, and the first note rose like a sunrise bright, commanding, undeniable. As the music unfolded, it carried my story. Every crescendo whispered the nights I had spent alone in rehearsal rooms. Every delicate passage reflected the quiet tears that no one had noticed. Every perfect silence between the notes screamed the truth. I had existed all along, even when no one acknowledged me. The audience responded with awe, their standing ovation growing louder with every bow. Cameras flashed, reviewers scribbled furiously, and yet the most satisfying moment was subtle. My family sitting in the audience, finally realizing they had been spectators of someone they never truly knew. After the performance, flowers were presented, and I accepted them with the calm dignity I had honed over years of being overlooked. My father approached, a single rose trembling in his hand. His eyes were red, his posture uncertain. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. I smiled. Not for him, and not for anyone but for myself. I no longer needed validation from those who had underestimated me. My revenge had never been about ruin or public humiliation. It had been about excellence, about rising quietly, steadily, and allowing my achievements to speak louder than any accusation, apology, or favor ever could. Walking off the stage that night, I realized the sweetest victory doesn't scream, it resonates. It lingers, it hums in the spaces others never thought to notice. I had been invisible once, but now every note I conducted, every standing ovation, and every opportunity I earned carried the music of my triumph. And that, I understood fully for the first time, was more powerful than any fortune, any title, or any superficial praise.